Episode 4 of the Ask Donaldson show. This show is for you, and it is centered around the real estate exam. So wherever you're taking the test, if you want some last-minute advice on how to pass the test the first and only time you take it, you're home. This is your place. My name is Chris Donaldson, and let's get to the questions. Ryan, what is this week's question for the Ask Donaldson show?
If a purchase agreement is signed stating a seller can sue for 10% of the purchase price if the buyer backs out, yet State of Louisiana states only the good faith deposit can be kept by the seller, which actually holds up in court?
All right, first of all, I want a warning when we produce this. This is a Louisiana question. I want like blinking lights. Louisiana, because alert, this is a Louisiana specific question. So if you're taking the Louisiana test, listen closely. So the question comes about purchase agreements. And really it's bringing in contract law, real estate contracts, the whole 9 yards. And it's the idea of if there's a deposit, well then what other avenues are available, or are there any other avenues available? It can be confusing. And one of the things that I will say is, this is why real estate agents are worth their weight in gold, because this stuff that I'm protecting my clients from are the things that they may not even be aware of. How much I know about these contracts, how I know to prepare them properly, and how I know to protect my client from getting out of trouble. So really, let's break it down. First, let's talk about a deposit. Now in Louisiana, again, Louisiana specific question, I want that thing up there. So Ryan, when we produce, I want that up there because I want to, this is Louisiana specific. There's 2 ways that you can write a contract. One is what's called earnest money. The other is really everything else, or we can call with specific performance available. And so let's start first with earnest money. Earnest money means there's a deposit. So when the buyer makes an offer to purchase the house, there's a $5,000 deposit. And then what makes earnest money what it is you declare it as the earnest money. I mean, it specifically has to say that in writing on the contract. So that means if there's default or breach, one of the parties doesn't perform, $5,000 is the damage amount. Nothing else can be sued for. That's what earnest money is about. There's a deposit, but it's declared. The other in Louisiana is when there is either a deposit or not, but it has not been declared. And what I want you guys to understand is the default in Louisiana, how we do most of our real estate deals, is actually the second type, which is not earnest money, where there are other remedies for default. In fact, guys, is there a purchase agreement in here somewhere? Can somebody give me a purchase agreement, a Louisiana purchase agreement? We have them everywhere. Yeah, there we go. Look, I'm a real estate agent, man. I got purchase agreements. In Louisiana, we have a standardized purchase agreement form. You can get it off the commission's website. It looks like this. And what I want you guys to understand is the default here is that we do not use earnest money. We have stipulated damages. So if you flip through the purchase agreement, one of the most important pieces in here is it talks about what happens if there's default by the seller. That's on page 6. On page 7, what happens if there's default by the buyer? And what I want you guys to understand is contracts, the beauty of them is it's in writing. It says there are damages of 10% of the sales price as stipulated damages. So in Louisiana, what we're saying is even if there is a deposit, there are further damages that can be incurred if the buyer or the seller fails to perform. So let me give you an example. Let's say the day before closing, the whole reason the seller was selling their house was because they got another job out of state. And then out of everybody's control, the seller's new job falls through. Let's say it was in Lehman Brothers in 2008. Lehman Brothers goes out of business. They don't have a job, so they want to back out of the sale. They don't have a reason to move, so they don't want to sell their house. That's why we have contracts. So what that means is the seller could legally back out, but they would likely forfeit the deposit, and they would owe 10% of the sales price. This is the buyer's side, not this is the seller's side. 10% of the sales price as damages. So in other words, guys, when it comes down to contracts, that's why we do them in writing. Because what the contract says is what we go by. So if it got to a lawsuit with the buyer and the seller, we're going to carry these contracts into court, stick them to the judge, and the judge is going to decide, is it a contract? And if it is, usually they're going to enforce the contract as it's written. So what I want you guys to understand is in Louisiana, earnest money is in contract law, and it's a type of contract that you could write, but typically in the regular practice of real estate, we use option 2, which is there are other damages and specific performance possibly available. And so the way I'll describe it to you if you're learning contracts is this. Here's the easy example. I use contracts and the example of a parking garage. Here's the parking garage example. What happens when you pull up to a parking garage? You click the little thing, you get a ticket, up comes the arm, you drive into the garage. That's a contract. What happens if you immediately try to back out without paying the parking garage and there's spike strips to prevent you? What's going to happen? Consequences. You may have got out of the parking garage without having to pay, but you lost 4 tires on your car. That's the way a contract is written. There's got to be remedies in case there's default, in case one of the parties fails to perform. So in Louisiana, we like to have more than just the deposit. And so even if you have a deposit, you could also lose more if you breach the contract, like backing out the day before closing. So Jessica, that was the name on the email, right? Right? Jessica, hopefully that helps you understand, because I know in Louisiana contract law, it can be a little bit confusing. And the primary reason is because every other state does it a little bit differently. Every other state talks about their deposit or calls their deposit earnest money. In Louisiana, it's a little bit different. So make sure if you're preparing for the Louisiana exam that you pay attention to those nuances, those differences in Louisiana civil law and common law, which is every other state. All right, so hopefully that will help you pass the exam and also succeed in your career. Ryan, how did we do? Do you think we answered the question?
We did it. Nailed it.
Good. All right. So guys, if you want to ask your question and you want me to answer it right here on the show, again, this is all about passing the exam. That is my passion. So here's how you can ask a question, 2 ways. The first is hit us up on Twitter. The school is at Donaldson School. So at Donaldson School on Twitter, and use the hashtag AskDonaldson. And the second way is you can email, just like Jessica did, email your question to ask@donaldsoneducation.com. So you keep bringing me your questions about the real estate exam, and I will keep answering them for you right here on the Ask Donaldson Show.